Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about wargaming modern warfare. How soon is too recent? So this is a potentially touchy subject, very closely linked to the subject of is enjoying war games unethical, and possibly a can of worms that I'm about to open, and something I've been thinking about for a long time. I did actually read an article recently called "Is Enjoying War Games Unethical?" and of course the conclusion of it was no, it isn't, because it was written by a wargamer. But you know, it's something that we should be asking ourselves, so that we understand why we wargame. And are we wargaming for the right reasons? And particularly if we then are interacting with non-wargamers, because ultimately some of them are going to be thinking to themselves, you know, why is this person glorifying war? And particularly if you're playing more modern games that are very recent memory. So my personal stance is that I'm not necessarily interested in playing anything post-World War II. That being said, I have played Vietnam games. I have an interest in the Falklands War because that was going on when I was a young boy, although I've never played that period. But essentially, I'm not interested necessarily in painting and playing anything post Second World War, really. That's not an ethical stance, that's just because I'm not interested in the periods as much as I am in older periods. Maybe one day I'll get round to doing Vietnam myself, or maybe something a little bit more modern. But at the moment I can't see that happening. But I say that's not an ethical issue, it's just an aesthetic one perhaps. I prefer to play these older periods with more interesting uniforms and interesting politics and history. But it does have to be asked, does playing more modern conflicts can it be interesting from a political point of view? Because obviously the politics of that era, that conflict, can still be resonating very strongly in today's world. You know, I would say the same can be argued for long gone wars. You know, when you're wargaming anything from the 18th and 19th century, the implications of some of those wars still resonate today in the shape of nations, the geopolitics of the world that we live in. So I find that actually quite interesting, to look at these supposedly old wars and going, I can see how that's influenced the world today. But of course, playing something that's very, very modern, something like Desert Storm, for instance, you know, the veterans are still very much alive in many cases. And the implications of that particular war, for instance, are very much resonating in today's world. So I can understand that there's a potential interest there. But the question I'm asking you is that too soon? Is it too uncomfortable to play that? Now, obviously, some people don't feel it's uncomfortable, and indeed many veterans of those conflicts play those periods, and if you're one of those, I'd love to hear from you. Take your perspective on wargaming modern conflicts that maybe you fought in. So I'd love to hear from you in that respect. But for other non-veteran wargamers, you know, how do you feel about wargaming periods where the veterans are still very much alive and possibly still fighting? You know, it's not just an ethical question. It's is it respectful? I think is the question. I mean, like, for instance, a good example would be the war in Ukraine. There's absolutely no way I think I would. There's no way I personally would wargame Ukraine while it's going on. You know, that would, in my opinion, my humble opinion, be unethical. You know, while people are still fighting for their freedom, and civilians and other people are dying, you know, as we up there, I would not think that would be right. Personally, I don't think that would be right to wargame that. But I can see how in future years it might be an interesting conflict to wargame. You know, pieces of equipment from a 50-year period of varying qualities and varying qualities of troops, and all of the politics and the detail of this war is fascinating. And watching the news is both a combination of grim and fascinating from a wargamer's perspective, because obviously, you know, the conflict is going on. The outcome is still, as I do this video, is still very much in the balance. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of predictions about what might happen in the coming months. From a wargamer's perspective, looking back at this period, maybe 10 years in the future, may be very, very interesting, because one of the things that I think about wargaming is it gives us the ability to re-look at history with fresh eyes in our particular way. Obviously historians and other people will look at a period of history in a different way, but I think wargamers have a particular way of looking back at history, and I think in some ways as well there's an interesting element of, can armchair generals like us accurately predict what's going to happen in an ongoing conflict right now? You know, did we assess it right? I mean, I have some wargaming friends who were convinced of Russia's army's superiority before the war, and within a few months it became very clear that not only was the quality very poor, the motivation was terrible, the leadership was virtually non-existent, or certainly on the battlefield, and the equipment was like out of date, unmaintained, and all the rest. It's seemingly come as a shock even to the experts. But interesting to see if any of the armchair historians out there had sort of predicted any of those sort of things. It's a way of testing our knowledge. We like to pretend we really understand a conflict and can understand it. You know, is the current conflict, for instance, testing that ability, testing our ability to predict and analyse in a live, ongoing situation. So anyway, I digress. So yes, current conflicts, anything really within the last 40 or 50 years, I personally am not interested in playing, but the more current it is, the less comfortable I am with playing it. But the question that I asked at the beginning of the video, and what I would ask you, is it unethical to play that particular period? And you know, if anyone out there wants to get offended by the fact that I'm asking if it's unethical, you know, I'm not trying to be politically correct here. I'm asking a legitimate question. You know, so you know, I don't particularly want to stir up a hornet's nest with people going about, oh, I'm woke and all the rest. Right? I'm asking a genuine question. Is it unethical to you know, for and against arguments for wargaming a very recent or even indeed an ongoing period of conflict? And what about in the future? Would you play, for instance, Ukraine, maybe in 10 years' time, when hopefully everything is resolved? So yeah, as always, I'd love to hear from you. And as mentioned earlier, if you're a veteran and you do wargame and you wargame modern periods, particularly if you wargame a period you fought in, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Your insights would be fascinating, and I'm sure other people would love to hear your insights on why you find wargaming that period useful. You know, is it mental health benefits? Is it because you understand the period? I'd love to know what your perspective is on that sort of thing. And as I said, what was people generally viewers' perspectives on wargaming modern periods, and how soon is too soon to wargame a period. Well, I hope you found today's video interesting and I didn't work you up too much. As always, if you did enjoy the video, please like, subscribe and share, and if you want to keep up to date with my weekly videos, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, look after yourself, keep gaming, and of course keep rolling high.